I want to share with you a little bit from my perspective about the startup world, the opportunities, and some of the lessons learned that I've had in my career. I spend most of my time in big technology companies. I'm quite, unfortunately, very experienced. I'm towards the end of my career, but I've had some phenomenal experiences that have shaped, of course, the way I approach startups now. And I started my career at Hewlett Packard. I spent 23 years there. I was at Microsoft. I was CEO of SGI. A number of operating roles. So I'm an operating person. I approach investments and the venture world with an operating perspective, how to build and fix and lead businesses. And so the comments I'm making today are really from that perspective. And so I'm going to go through this material, but I would really hope that there's some questions and some discussion that we can have at the end, because that's always the best part. So, three things I want to talk about is the opportunity in terms of the world of startups. I began thinking about and being involved in startups. There are really two elements that have shaped my view. One is in my time primarily at Microsoft. When I joined Microsoft, I came during, this was for many of you who are too young, but I came during what was the dot-com boom, the real first established of this new, broad digital world of opportunity around the internet. And that was an amazing time, phenomenal growth, money flowing everywhere, and most of it crashed. But I think also that experience and what we talked about back in the year 2000 is what is behind what we see happening today. Because what we said back then is happening now, right? So the problem is we said it, 15 plus years ago, and the market wasn't ready, the technologies weren't ready, the business models didn't work, and so a lot of it failed. But it did establish a lot, and I learned a lot from Microsoft because I joined at Microsoft in 1999, and I became head of the, we called it the consumer business. But it was basically what it was 16 businesses, most of which were startups that we acquired that collectively were losing $1 billion a year. Hard to imagine. I can hardly imagine it myself. But so my role was to sort through it all, figure out what we should do, what we shouldn't do, how we should fix things. It was, it was a very challenging experience. But part of what comes when you work in a company that has massive wealth is people can make investments and spend money, not worry about business models and all sorts of things. Anyway, I'll give you a funny story because I think people like stories more than they like the content. So I got there, and one of the first things I looked at was we had a business for software in the U.S. for preparing your taxes. Okay, so you have to do tax returns, and you have to have a federal tax return and a state tax return. And there was a software that was primarily Intuit, had like 85% market share. This was a company we bought and we were building to try to start. And the head of that business came to me and said, "Rick, I need more money," which was not a popular topic with me at the time. And so he said, I need to talk about how much more investment. And I remember saying to him, he was very disappointed to hear. I said, I have a more fundamental question as to why are we in this business. And so we went down this path of communication. Ultimately, I ended up killing it. And I'll never forget that was my first decision in this business. My first decision at Microsoft. And my first decision on the path of doing what I thought I was hired to do, which was turn this $1 billion loss to profit. So that was the first one. And I'll never forget Steve Ballmer at the time, came into my office and said, Rick, we don't do this. And I go, what do you mean we don't do this? He goes, we don't give up. We don't cancel businesses here. I said, but Steve, we have 16 businesses losing $1 billion. We have to focus. We have to decide what we're going to do, what we're not going to do. We have to, and ultimately I ended up with 4. I went from 16 to 4. And I said, either you fit into the 4, becomes part of the 4, or we get to sell it or kill it. And we did that. And anyway, there's a huge amount of controversy because those decisions weren't made that way. But I learned a lot by taking these businesses that had great potential, really strong entrepreneurs, and look through them and sort through them and figure out what leads to success. So some of that I'll share with you. The second part has come recently. When I left an operating job as a CEO in 2011, I decided I wanted to do something different. I got involved in a number of things, and ultimately that led me to make some investments personally, some angel investments, but more importantly to be associated with Innogest, which is now where I spend most of my time, and to get specifically focused around Italy, because I am Italian, even though my Italian language skills are very poor. I am Italian, and that also has allowed me to look and see many businesses, either from an investor's perspective or from an operating perspective. So all of that kind of leads to my point I'll share with you around the opportunity I see today, the principles, 5 things kind of that I've learned. And you could say these 5 things are part of how you evaluate or how you do a pitch. I think you could say that's if I were to do a startup pitch, I would do it around these 5 things. Or it's the mistakes or the challenges that we have in building and scaling a business. We'll talk about that. And then finally, I'll make a few comments on culture. Basically, I worked in companies with very strong cultures. And a culture is so powerful in terms of establishing how a company operates. And most of us think that's something that we think about when a big company is big. But I've learned that it's very important to establish early on in terms of how you operate as you build your team, what your principles are, what's the automatic immune kind of system that you have in which the way your company works. And I've learned, I worked at Hewlett Packard, very strong culture. Microsoft had a very strong culture. And then recently I visited a lot of the new companies, Facebook and Google, and they have also a very strong culture, but it's very different, extremely different than what I call the legacy companies, the places that I worked in the past. Okay, does that make sense? We'll go quickly here. So first of all, the opportunity. The startup environment is really very rich. It is mainstream. I mean, we used to think about startups as like the really crazy thing somebody did to go and try to create massive wealth, etc. Today, the technology industry and the thinking of an entrepreneur is very mainstream. People, big companies, want to be like little companies, as crazy as that sounds. And if you go around Silicon Valley today, you'll see, you drive around in these places where you see signs of big brands, major companies, all with their little operations to be startup-like. So people definitely understand that the world is changing. The digital technologies will impact every business, and people think today, of mainstream old businesses that are being, turned upside down around new technologies and new technologies and more. Which brings my second point too, which is that in the past, it was a core deep technology that made it the startup. Or today, it's moved beyond that. It's taking multiple technologies and building applications to do a function or run a company or some particular aspect of our economy better, to where it's now also led to disruptive business models to really change. I think I kind of duplicated my point here because I did some different phases of sleep on the airplane, but it's really changed and moved beyond pure technology to taking technologies and applying them in different ways across a value chain and industry, etc. So the whole technology environment has become very mainstream, very critical, and yet is extremely competitive because everyone believes now, that they're an entrepreneur and that they're going to, be able to have their idea prevail. I think Stefano made a point. We looked at how many investments a year.
1,000.
1,000 investments and make 1,000 companies and make 5 investments. That's pretty competitive, right? And I think that's you see that across the board. So full of opportunity, but very competitive. What I think just to reinforce the tech world is upside down. When I graduated from college, from university, we all wanted to go to work for the big companies. That was the dream. They go to work for IBM, Hewlett Packard, or later on Microsoft. I mean, that was your ticket. And then a few people from there would have the courage to leave and go do a startup. And then some of those, very few of those, would be immensely successful by doing an IPO. That was kind of the mode of operation. Today it's upside down. And maybe the upside down is the right side up, which is today, it's tough for the large technology companies to recruit talent anymore. People see the startup world as mainstream. In fact, today, many of the old legacy companies are not getting the strongest talent in the industry because they've become too slow. They're not where innovation takes place anymore. And instead, these companies are relying on the startup ecosystem to be the source of their innovation. And, we see it over and over again. And on boards of director, I'm on the board of directors, I have been on the board of directors of several large companies. We do many startup acquisitions a year because we can't compete for a variety of reasons in terms of building the new opportunities. And we tend to look through the market. And I bet you, in my peak, we probably did, 10, 12, between the individual boards I'm on, 10 to 12 acquisitions of companies a year. So very much a completely different world than what existed before. So if you want to be an entrepreneur and you're in the startup world and you have an idea and you want to go down this path, it's very mainstream, it's very exciting, there's lots of opportunities and very different than it was before. The barriers to entry are historically low. Before you couldn't do a startup because it costs so much money to do a startup. Today with the cloud and open source and all of the things that are out there, you can really have an impact at a much lower level of investment. But the challenge, of course, is the competition for what you need in terms of talent, mind share, capital. All these things are becoming increasingly demanding. But I can just tell you, in my involvement with young companies, in entrepreneurs and stuff, it's a very exciting place, but very, very competitive. Okay, so I'll take you through the 5 principles that I thought were important, and I would love your thoughts at the end. The first one is you have to have a vision, a path forward for a marketplace, for a market, I should say market opportunity, that is big. Big idea, big vision. The belief that you're doing something that can be a very large market. I find a lot of times in companies I get involved with or I see that the market's just too small. It's just too small to be significant. And so as an entrepreneur, as you're building a company, you want to have that very big vision. That's the good news. Now the conflict there, you've got to have very focused execution because you can get into a lot of trouble by having a big vision and trying to do it. I mean, just the presentation we just went through, you get a big vision, but you also acknowledge that you got to be very focused in how you step forward with that. So that's the balance. And this is true in big companies, small companies. all along. I spent probably the best part of my career was when I was at HP. This is the best part, but that was kind of my career. But when I was at HP, and I took over the inkjet business, and we had the technical team had figured out how to shoot water-based dyes and ink out of a cartridge and put it on paper. That was the business. That was the innovation. We can do that really inexpensively. Because of that, we can print black print. We can do colors. We can do images. And so we had this big vision. We said we were going to commercialize this technology. We were going to change the way everything was printed, everything. And the market was huge. But we were very clear when we started, we could only do one thing. And that was we were going to prove that we could print black text equivalent to laser printers. Because laser printers were the dominant one. But we were going to do it at a fraction of the cost. And that was it. That's all that we did for a few years. Then we built on that as the technology improved, as we gained expertise, and turned it into, I don't know what it is today. Probably, at its peak, it's probably declining now. But at its peak, it probably, became a $10, $12 billion business. But it started very narrow, but with a very big vision. So big visions inspire. Big visions help you see that you have multiple paths. Big visions have a lot of benefits to it. But you have to start and not be confused with very, very focused execution. Otherwise, you run out of money, you don't execute well, you don't succeed. Secondly, is a sustainable competitive advantage. A lot of the companies you see today, you question, how do you sustain? What is your? You used to say, what is your secret sauce? What's the strength of what you built and what you developed that makes it really hard for other people to catch up with you? Being first is really big. Being first to do something is such a tremendous advantage. I've been on both sides, where I've been in the lead, I've been first, I've been the innovator, and I've been in situations where I've tried to catch up. And catching up is not good. Everything costs more. If you're behind, what the first person costs them €1, it's going to cost you 10 euros. It's just the way that it is. And so, being first is important, but having that clear, sustainable advantage is really important. So when we look at companies, or when you review a business, you're looking for that, and you're also looking at other competition and how other competitive methods can impact what the company is trying to do. And so the sustainable competitive advantage is very important. The third one is a compelling business model. Is the business model is a company that eventually can get to the point that will generate solid leadership profitability? And of course, it may take a very long time to do that. But there are a lot of businesses that you kind of scratch your head. And that was absolutely true during this failure period I mentioned when all this was started. I mean, there was tremendous innovation and ideas, but there was very little clarity about how people would ever make money at it. And so that's you got to have a business model, and I can tell you, as investors, you look for the margins and the model that says that this is going to ultimately lead to a profitable business. Related to that is the go-to-market strategy and scalable unit economics. What used to be technology, you spent a lot of money as a new company building technology. That's becoming, in a sense, lower cost. And Bill Gates used to talk at Microsoft about the magic of software. With software, you can do amazing things. And what's replaced that now is the go-to-market strategy for digital companies, which is how Yeah, so I've got this thing in the cloud, or I've got this business model that I've developed, but now how do I get customers? And how do I do that in a scalable way? And how do I do that with unit economics that makes sense? How much does it cost me to get a customer, keep a customer, and what kind of profit can I expect from that customer? And you know, again, I've been in businesses where the cost of winning the business doesn't justify the return for that. It doesn't justify it. Doesn't make sense. So the go-to-market strategy is really critical. How do I scale the business? I can get one customer, two customers, but how do I get 1,000? And I spend a lot of time nowadays, you know, on the enterprise, where I spend a lot of time in the enterprise business is a case in point, where if you don't have the right business model, and if you look at what it takes to build an enterprise sales capability, it's got to all make sense, and you have to have a vision on how you do that. And then the final point is the team, and you know, you can't say enough about the team, but again, this is true with whether you're operating a company or whether you're looking to invest in a company. The team is really critical, and it can't be said too much about getting the right people and making sure that you're dealing with building the right team is really essential, and that includes, you know, the skill set. It includes, you know, energy. I talk to startup companies where sometimes you wonder whether these guys really want to win. You gotta, you know, and yet wanting to win isn't enough. You've got to also have the skills. It's like, you think of the sports analogy of having the right players on the team, but you know, having the right players on the team doesn't make you win. But not having the right players on the team also doesn't make you win. So you got to sort that all out and have a team that is always willing to learn and change, because everyone will tell you every startup starts out one way and ends up some other way, and those decisions and transitions are essential to finding success. And if you're resistant to those, you end up failing. So these are just a few, you know, 5 things that I found in operating businesses or in looking at businesses today, is questions that have to be asked, points that have to be very, very clear when you're building a strategy and a business plan. Got it. So then let's talk about culture. You know, I've seen a lot of startup young companies who have cultures like an old company. And you go, how did that happen? You know, because that's the word. And what I mean by that is, you know, becoming bureaucratic, hierarchical. You know, where the boss is the boss and everyone waits for the boss. And, you know, hub and spoke. I mean, there's all sorts of things that affect the way a company operates, and whether you move fast or whether you move slow. I could go through a list of 50 items here, and I picked a few, but I could go through so many things that I think are important if I were building a company today that I would look for. Let me mention the first one. You know, you guys know about the agile methodology for software development. I mean, that's kind of the state of the art today. I went back to be a CEO about a year ago on a temporary basis. And it was interesting because I knew I wasn't going to be there very long. I was there longer than I thought. I was there 7 months. But we had a lot of problems. And I couldn't build a team. You know, I couldn't go and fire people and bring in new leaders and stuff, because I wasn't going to be the leader. I mean, how can I do that? So I said, this is what I have. And yet we have to make a lot of decisions and get the company moving. I wasn't going to be a caretaker. And so one thing I kind of retrained myself with that respect and said, we're going to run the company with the same kind of agile methodology that you run product development with. And that is, we're going to get teams together, we're going to list our initiatives, we're going to put teams together. We're going to have these scrum sessions, and people are going to, go through problems and issues, and we're going to make decisions, and we're going to go implement them, and we're going to come back in a few weeks, and we're going to check and see where we are, and what's working, we're going to keep doing. What's not working, we're going to stop doing, and we're going to start doing new things. And it ran it in a very very flat organization. And I concluded, from that I think that's a kind of methodology that can be used to run a business, and to have a culture that's very team oriented, that everyone has got their hands on the pulse of the organization, working together. Everybody knows what needs to get done. Everyone works in short bursts. We don't go and say, here's your annual objectives. In fact, I was working with a company recently where they wanted to do a business strategy, and I go, okay, well, here's the general. I go, you need to be, need to have a year's tactical plan. I mean, you don't do that anymore. I mean, how can you do a year tactical plan? I can do it for a few weeks because it's going to change the next few weeks. It's the process of this velocity of decisions and movement that is so important. And so I think it's important to have a culture that does that operates that way, that doesn't delegate and expect reports to come back, but it's very much hands-on, very much team-oriented. The second thing is, actually this is an HP thing we learned, doing a few things well. Another way of saying that whatever I would do as a startup or build a culture is, I want to do it with the utmost of quality. The best user experiences, I want to do it really well. And if I have only a few customers at first, I'm going to have a few really satisfied customers that really embrace the value proposition that we deliver. And I've watched that in a number of companies that really have this big high intensity around building a strong customer experience. When just another story. I mean, I had an interesting time when I was at SGI. We were struggling with the business and figuring out what the vision was and what things we should work on. And I was kind of down one day, and a guy who worked for me says, you ought to go and meet with somebody else, another CEO who's working on the same problems. And so I ended up, making a long story short, I ended up one day going over to the Apple campus and spending time with Steve Jobs just as he was coming back to the company, dealing with the problems there. And I really learned a lot there. I really learned from, I thought of Steve Jobs as having this, what we see today from Apple, is this really, again, this big vision. He was an example of having this big vision, but it was very much, in fact, he used these phrase to me. He said, that's all I really care about is putting one foot in front of the other. And that's all I tell my teams. Every day, you just put one foot in front of the other. And so it's part of this whole, focus, doing a few things well, being very clear what you're going to do today, having a sense of the direction you're pursuing, but not getting caught up on big plans. Flat, transparent organization and communications, and on all these things. Actually, Claudio, we work with at Innogest. When I came into Innogest, I found the culture was kind of like this. It's very much a startup culture. The office in Milan is a bunch of rooms. It looks like Facebook. I've been at Facebook. Everybody comes in with everybody's collaborating, working together, open communication. When I was at Microsoft, every employee, when I was there, 56,000 or so, had their own office. I'm not kidding, with a door on it. 56,000 offices. And people never talk to each other. You either talk to each other at a big meeting, and there was no meeting that had less than 50 people in it, or you talk to them over email, but you never just talk to people. And that's a cultural thing. And again, I think today's modern organization is very much focused on this agility, doing things well, focus, flat organizations, transparent, open communication, and it's important if you build a startup to think about creating a culture that embraces the kind of things that you want to go on forever, so that you can be successful in building the right people, the right organization, and attracting the right people so that they can do their best work. Integrity and reputation is key. I mean, I can't say enough about that. Again, about doing quality, taking care of customers. Open to feedback and criticism is also really important. One of the positive things we had at Microsoft was this statement that says you really have to be self-aware. Meaning, you need to approach your work always looking for the signals and the return signals of what you need to do to be better, and to be open to criticism. And it was an environment that if you weren't open to criticism, you wouldn't survive, because it was a very rough environment in terms of people giving you feedback. And if you couldn't take feedback, it just wasn't, you just didn't belong there. And I wasn't so good at that, but I learned to be able to take that to my future assignments, where I said as a CEO that I wanted to make sure that I was my own biggest critic. I wanted to go into the board and say, not here's all the good things we did, but to spend a lot of time on what problems we have, and disarm the conversation in terms of criticism, and to be very self-aware and driving my own improvement agenda. And that's something a lot of organizations and companies, and CEOs especially, and entrepreneurs maybe even more, don't do, because they're so proud of what they're doing that they have a hard time being vulnerable and being able to say, I've got these 5 problems that I need to fix, and I'm struggling on how to deal with it. It's a very important part of the culture, and you want your team to be able to have this point of view that I'm never perfect. I don't expect anyone to be perfect, but I expect everyone to want to get better and to keep moving in that way. And the final point I mentioned today is around a culture, is to really have a culture that thrives on innovation. I learned the hard way in big companies, so many times people saying things couldn't be done. And then somebody else in another company would do it. And that would drive me crazy. And I finally now learned that disbelief is something that, that something could be done, that in the world of technology, anything is possible. And you don't ever want to set your bar so low that you get surprised. I mean, I can remember, in the printer business, how many times technical people said, oh, no. I can say, why can't we do this for $100 instead of $500? Oh, it'll never be done. It'll never be done. 6 months later, somebody did it. I thought it couldn't be done. Oh, or we could never print. I mean, it was all, you have to create an environment where it's very innovative. There's no limitations in the way people think about possibilities. And I think today, if you look at an example of cloud, and the way the cloud is operating today, 10 years ago, maybe even less, as being in the computer systems business, we'd say this is totally crazy. There is no way that a few engineers are going to build their own system architecture and throw out everything that's been done by IBM and all the big system guys. That's exactly what it is today. Today, the big system companies are in such trouble because as workloads move to the cloud, they're moving to completely different architectures than Windows and all of these other things that have become the core of the industry. That we would have said that makes absolutely no sense, but it's mainstream. So anyway, that's back to this point of innovation, to have an environment that's very conducive and open to people believing they can do amazing things. And so today, when someone would say, I want to do this, and my initial reaction, well, that doesn't make sense. I don't do that. I don't do that anymore. I let things move and let things roll and see what's possible. So I'm going to stop. Those are just a bunch of random things I went through today, I realized. I wanted to share with you, some of my experiences of what makes companies successful and some of the challenges that we face. I want to talk a little bit about culture, and that's a whole topic of discussion, but I wanted to put a few thoughts in there as you think about building a company. Think now of what you want that company, how you want it to operate, and what you want. Don't just back into it, but be ambitious about thinking about the kind of environment and place that you want to create for people to come and do amazing things, because it's really important. And bad cultures, impact, or I shouldn't say bad cultures, cultures that don't fit the business strategy that you have can be one of the things that cause you to fail. I mean, I can remember it when I went to SGI, I'll tell you a funny, a guy I was on a board with, he's a CIO at Facebook, and we worked together at SGI, and he went to Zuckerberg. In the interview, Zuckerberg said, "Where did you work?" And I worked at SGI. And Zuckerberg said, "Who was SGI?" So you guys may have the same reaction, but it was a company that was very, very, very innovative, and then decided to enter the PC business, which is very not innovative, and it didn't work. Right? The culture of this innovative culture didn't fit with a very standards-based, operationally efficient culture, because we weren't at all operationally efficient. And so getting the culture right is very important.